I was so tempted to get up here and make a really serious face and say something about how sometimes it's important for a minister to put aside what she had planned to preach to address an issue of profound concern in the world. And then I was going to talk about the deflated footballs. But you can't make a joke like that nowadays because there are so many horrible things that do come up that, you know. But anyway, it's very much on my mind and heart. Oh, heavens. Oh, we are a funny species. Well, I think it depends on what kind of person you are, whether or not you appreciate committee work. I've myself not tended to, but that's really an understatement. I've avoided committees with great enthusiasm most of my life, and also still to this day refuse to serve on boards unless someone like an outgoing president of the denomination personally asks me to serve, which happened when Bill Sinkford left the presidency. Working with people, oh, it's just much more difficult and complicated than getting things done by yourself. But working with others is also one of the best ways to get better at being an understanding, self-aware, connected, relational, accountable human being. I came into the ministry and church involvement from a teaching background, where I planned my lessons alone, taught in the classroom alone, evaluated my students' work alone. I came into seminary not realizing I was a Lone Ranger type, and thinking that I would use the MDiv, the Master of Divinity degree, to go into mediation or some kind of community ministry, because I had no interest in parish life. My previous involvements with church had shown me that congregations were full of petty politics and that it took forever to get anything done. I don't know what happened to me while I was doing my parish internship. I would call it a conversion experience. And I haven't even thought about it that much. I just know that something changed radically for me. God became evident not just in the prayers, but in the policy making and in those meetings that seemed to be such drudgery. And here I am almost 20 years later with you saying, maybe I should have thought about this more. I think what happened is that out of necessity, I spent 2 years invested in the life of a particular congregation. And like anything you do with your whole heart and effort, I fell in love with it because I was open to seeing its beauty and worth. I kind of had to be forced into that by the requirements of my degree. Now I consider committee work and meetings in the church and policy making to be beautiful spiritual practices. The day that I don't find a board meeting a wonderful experience is the day I'll know I have to think about retiring. When we worship, we know we're being the church. We know this when we march for justice. We know we are being the church. When we feed the hungry or put together a Christmas party for people who don't get one, we know we are being the church. But guess what? When we meet in committees and ministry teams and go through an agenda with care and consideration, when we listen to each other at those meetings or congregational meetings to do the business of the church, when we have patience with that group process, we are just as much being the church. The vision of ministry represents being the church just as much as does worship or religious education or small group ministry or any other time we practice love and reverence and care. The psychologist Arthur Aron did an experiment 20 years ago to see if he could make people fall in love in his laboratory. And he succeeded. The technique he used was this. A heterosexual man and woman who had never met were asked to be together in the same space and to ask and answer for each other a series of increasingly personal questions on a survey. And then, after sharing questions and answers, they were asked to look into each other's eyes for 4 minutes, uninterrupted, without breaking the gaze. One of the couples married 6 months later. So interesting. Mandy Len Catron wrote about it in the New York Times on January 9th, and she wrote about doing that experiment with a date, and she did fall in love with him and he with her. I don't know what it is. Maybe it is a thing about paying such close attention, going slowly and listening, really listening to somebody, being present for them. That's something that happens in church life. It's something we are always training ourselves to do, and ideally we are constantly reminding each other of that. So many of our words, for instance, there's an opening words that says, by Annie Dillard, that says we are here to look into each other's eyes and to see their communion. A vision of ministry, which just sounds like, oh gosh, another bunch of policy or just kind of one of those statements, oh, it's on the order of service, yeah, that, okay, you know. It's actually something that appears on our board's agenda every year. We may not totally revise it every year, but every year the policy of this church requires the board to review it. The vision of ministry is arrived at after a lot of hard work and many drafts. The board reviewed recent studies that the church has done of itself, the Growth Membership Task Force and the Religious Education Visioning Task Force Committee Policy Concept thing. I forget all the names. And it spoke informally and formally with a lot of members and leaders and talked at length amongst itself. The board members talked to each other and I talked to them and we shared lots of emails. And what it all boils down to is that we looked closely at the church with love, with openness, with the kind of attentiveness that you give someone that you really want to fall in love with or think you might be open to falling in love with. The thing about any of these documents, any of this kind of work, is that it comes to life, no matter how dry it seems, it comes to life when you spend that uninterrupted time looking at it. When you ask it and you ask each other deep questions about what matters, what are we here for? So I want us to spend at least that 4 uninterrupted minutes gazing at our vision of ministry, if you would be so kind. I hope that if you're new or newish to this church, these phrases may give you a sense of interest and curiosity. If you're a member here, well, I hope they will instill in you a sense of ownership. This is our vision of ministry, the act of being the church together. The first one really is the usual, right? Oh, everybody needs to pitch in and get things done. But one thing I wanted to just underline here is the word hospitality is not just tacked on for convenience sake. It really means, look, whatever we do, all of our leadership, all of our participation has to be done with a sense of welcome, with a sense of gracious hospitality. Otherwise, it's not really grounded in the kind of love and spirit in which a church really has to be grounded in. The other two things don't mean much if the hospitality isn't there. Linda Enrico is going to be preaching on hospitality and love in February. The second vision, a part of our vision of ministry, committing ourselves to strengthening our church's sense of unity and community really comes out of the board's and my awareness and some of yours that we are, in some ways, we're a very, very small congregation. We're 150 or so members. But in some ways, we are almost like 5 congregations of 25 people. We're several congregations. We're lots of different congregations a word for that I don't like much because it makes it sound like we're all cows in a barn is silos. Our personality as a church is really interesting to me because I'm new here, and I noticed that we are a passionate people. There are a lot of introverts in the congregation, and there's very strong opinions in the congregation. And so people are really into the thing that they're into, which is so great. But it also means that it's my job to remind you and for you to remind each other, wait a minute, we're one congregation. We're one people. So even though you work really hard and passionately and you're part of the church, we have to constantly remember, maybe I should move out of my little silo and go to the thing or talk to the person that I don't see that often and really move across the areas of interest, to cross-pollinate and to create stronger bonds. So that was an important part of our vision in getting stronger. 3, connecting to our surrounding communities and our denomination. The new thing here is our denomination. You're terrific, and the Unitarian Universalist Association doesn't know enough about you and doesn't know enough of you. So I would love for this congregation to be non-competitive in our way of being a church. So many congregations are a little bit scared. They think they're fighting for limited resources in the form of church-going people, which is so silly. We're not fighting for anything, and we're not in competition for anything. We are a community. Everybody is welcome. They're welcome to come in. They're welcome to leave if it's not for them. They're welcome to go find another congregation of any faith tradition, any religious community that ministers to them. We believe and we promote that community matters. And we want so much to be the community that can minister to tons of people. But that doesn't mean that we're grasping and, in our resources. We've got to share our resources and our presence and our enthusiasm and our intelligence with neighboring UU congregations and then just like neighboring communities. I do think this congregation does that well, and I am so proud of you for that, and I think that we can do it even more and make it part of our real commitment. Celebration is the opposite of competition. So I don't remember who put that word in there, but we need to celebrate more. And fourth, this has been a little confusing to some of you who have said, during the next 3 to 5 years, articulating a strategy and an action plan for our continued presence in Lynn. We are committed to the city of Lynn. Our church historically comes out of the city of Lynn. What this means is that the next 3 to 5 years, the board wants to come up with either an action plan for some kind of brick and mortar presence or program in Lynn, and or to say at the end of that 3 to 5 years, and we don't know, probably 5, to say we're not going to try to have a brick and mortars program in Lynn. We just have to see how big we are and what our capacity is. So this is something that's going to take brain power and commitment for people to think about. We have an endowment by which we could actually fund some kind of program in the city of Lynn eventually. Well, who's going to oversee that? Me? Okay, I'd be happy to. Then we'll have to call an associate minister to do pastoral care and preaching and all kinds of things here so that your senior minister can be in the city of Lynn overseeing a program there. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of practicalities if we wanted to seed something. So this is a real action item for us because we do a lot of agonizing. We've done a lot of studying about how we should be present in Lynn. At this time, we are present with partner organizations there, and we do a lot of supporting of city programs. So this will be an area of discernment for us. Well, I wound up, as I said, finding God in policy and committee work and finding spiritual meaning there. I fell in love with it and did make it my full-time job. What gives me great joy, perhaps the greatest joy, is to watch lay people fall in love with the work of the church too, and commit to it in the way that any of us commits to a love relationship. So I want you now to hear from one of those people, Chris Hansen.
Many of you who are here on Sunday morning see me happily singing in the choir, at least most weeks. I'm also the chair of nominating and leadership, working with Victoria Kelleher and our staff liaison, Linda Enrico. Our job is to develop a slate of church members for all of you to vote on at the end of this season. Those approved will go on to fill our next year's church committees. We do this by matching your interests, your talents, your experience, and your abilities with open committee positions. We then seek your approval to put you on the ballot. Once you start as a committee member, we then think about how to support your growth through committee work by providing information and recommendations on leadership and skills training, on workshops and conferences in areas of interest and in areas of need. Those of you who are on committees may recall that Linda has sent out several options for programs and workshops this year. Forgive the following list. I know that many of you have done many, many things in this church and much more than me, but just as an example, over my 30 years as a member here at UUCGL, I've participated as a trustee on the UUCGL board and on the Ocean Breeze board, as well as been a member on committees like the Investment Committee, chairing the Grants Committee, and chairing Nominating Committee, as well as being a member of our ministry teams, Social Justice, UUA Affairs, Social Events, Music, Green Sanctuary, and the membership team. I was also a member of the Ministerial Search Committee, the Sabbatical Committee, and the Ministerial Relations team. I didn't start out with that in mind. I just thought I'd attend services and perhaps sing in the choir, maybe help out at coffee hour now and then, and maybe I'd get involved with social concerns or, something. But as I began to see the wonderful work being done by so many of the people that I liked and admired here, I began to participate more. I think I started by teaching in the RE program with young children, and later teaching a program similar to OWL for the teens. And teaching opened so many doors to me. Through the work itself, through getting to know the children and seeing them develop, through the training, the workshops, and of course, RE Week at Ferry Beach, where many of us went with our families every summer. All of those programs together brought new ideas, introduced innovative curriculums, and best of all, the shared experiences informed and deepened my personal and church relationships. Reverend Vicki asked me to talk about leadership and spirituality. Well, spirituality is very personal, and it's hard for me to articulate. What I can say is this: it informs the way I live my life today. It is a way of thinking, living, loving, being in the world that colors and adds dimension to my actions and my relationships. To make the bridge to leadership, I believe that every one of us can contribute to making this a better world to live in and to leave to our children and our grandchildren. But I know for this to happen, we all need to jump on board and participate, to contribute in small or in large ways. I suggest starting small. Learn about our church through our ministry teams. But whatever your way, why not start here? Why not start now at our church?